All right, hello class. Welcome to week 7. We are in the latter, the latter half. I was going to say the latter third, but not quite yet. We have one more week. We're in the tail end of this term. It has gone very quickly. I hope you guys are enjoying the topics of conversation. I find that the conversations that I'm reading in your discussion boards are really interesting. And I can tell that you guys are thinking hard about the difference between Kant and utilitarianism, that you're feeling a little bit more comfortable using them in sentences, and that you have a better grasp over what they mean and what they entail. I also hope that you are feeling a little bit more comfortable identifying yourself ethically. I hope that you're finding yourself agreeing more or less with one or the other, and that you're able to use this philosophical approach for understanding and how you feel and why you feel the way that you do. So this week we're going to be talking a little bit about discrimination. And you, like me, probably grew up learning that it was not fair to discriminate. It was unethical to discriminate. But that's not entirely true. We were taught not to discriminate based off of specific categories or characterizations, right? We were told not to discriminate against someone because of their race or their ethnicity, because of their gender, because of their ability or disability, or because of their sexual orientation. And while some of that, I know it remains highly contested, today is even the subject of judicial action. For the most part, I find that we are largely as a society agreed that discriminating against someone because of those categories is not right. But can we move past right to this question of ethics? Is it ethical to discriminate, or is it not ethical to discriminate against someone based upon these specific categorizations? And what makes these categorizations so protected? We as a society discriminate against people all the time for other reasons, as we'll read about this week in the textbook. I am as a faculty member, as a college professor, I have been discriminated against multiple times when I was applying for a job. Now, they were not discriminating against me because of my race or my gender, I hope not, or my religion. They were discriminating against me because of my education or lack of education. They discriminated against me because of the amount of publications I have or the lack of publications. All right, and we are okay with that. I think as a society, we are okay with discriminating against people based off of their qualifications. Are there other areas where it's safe to discriminate? For instance, my mother told me all the time before going to school that I should be very discriminating with who I associated with, that I shouldn't be friends with just anyone, and I should be very discerning of how other people act. And she was very specific about the type of actions that reflected a poor character, and that I should try to avoid those people. Is that fair? Is that ethical? If not, why? If so, why? So these are some of the questions that we will be looking at today. What are those protected categories that we shouldn't discriminate against people? But more than that we shouldn't, why shouldn't we discriminate against people because of questions about, say, their gender or their race? What are the ethical arguments for and against that? So this week we'll be looking at chapter 8 in the textbook. As always, there's a reading quiz, which can be found in the assignments and projects folder. In addition, there is a discussion board forum for you. Remember, your first post is due by Wednesday. Your responses to 2 of your classmates are due by Sunday. For the most part, I've been very pleased with the discussion board, though I will remind you that there are a word count requirement, or at least a minimum word count that I encourage you to hit. That's 300 words in your initial response and 100 to your classmates. This week we also will continue with these optional case study presentations. This week, I'm not familiar with what the assignment is. Let me pull it up for you. This week, chapter 7, Ah, yes, what a great topic. The ethics of reparations for descendants of slaves. Ah, isn't this great? Um, I go into a little bit more detail about the idea of reparations for the descendants of slaves in one of the class videos that you can find in the materials and resources page. So go out and seek that out if you want to talk a little about reparations, which is essentially cash payment or financial payment for past wrongs. So should we as a nation make payment to the descendants of slaves as a way of apologizing, but also as a way of acknowledging that slaves worked without pay, without compensation for sometimes entire life periods. And during that time, that individual was unable to accrue value or save money that could then be passed on as an inheritance to a descendant. They couldn't own property or a home. There was no retirement money that they could save up. There was nothing passed on. And then if we continue to see discrimination with Jim Crow laws in the South, we see discrimination in housing and employment in the 1930s, 40s, 50s. Right? All of this discrimination plays eventually an impact on the present day. So is it ethical for Americans today, taxpayers, to make cash payments to the descendants of slaves? Should be a really fascinating ethical discussion that you have. All right. Well, I look forward to seeing your work this week, class. As always, should you have any questions, please shoot me an email, brantellsworth@centralpenn.edu.